So I've been able to pass the copy of the queries out to those of us here in person. I don't have an easy way. Oh, you have an iPad there, right?
Yep.
Let me see if I can air link or whatever it's called. Send you a copy of the document. Should have it here somewhere. Of course, I can't find it. Right. Try to airdrop this to you. Oh,
All right.
here we go. It says waiting.
Oh, there it comes. Accept. Got it.
Hopefully you can get that up there.
Let's see. Is it a Word doc?
Yeah. So I'll read the first query. Worship. How does the Spirit encourage ministry and seek to deepen the spiritual life of the meeting and of individual friends? Folks online, if you have something to contribute, I really can't see anybody's hand raised, so speak right up.
Oh, please speak. I guess thinking about this, I suppose Spirit probably moves people in various different ways, just as I might feel moved in different ways to provide ministry, or even what I'm thinking about. It may be for me that Spirit, I have something on my mind that has just been on my mind all day, all week, and there's lessons there for me, and perhaps something comes to me during meeting that Spirit moves me to speak, and then sometimes the time may be zero, so I suppose it's either way. So that's kind of my thoughts, or some thoughts.
Mary.
it makes a difference to me to hear what's said in this room. And with that, I would have to say, having the hybrid meeting and having the gift of having friends who are physically very distant from us be able to participate has been great for me.
Sitting over here where I can see these friends.
Yeah, well, they're tiny.
But I do have something, if I may, Steve.
Yeah, you could stop share for now,
Yeah.
so we can see the other folks. Thanks.
Something, if I may, Steve.
Please.
Okay. Over this year, I have from time to time felt that the meeting is a little too silent. Of course, it's not terribly unusual and not always a bad thing that entire meetings go by and there's no ministry. The spirit-filled silence can be some of the weightiest meetings that you can be in. But over time, when there's too many of these totally silent meetings, I began to worry because I think a certain measure of how the Spirit is moving among us is the degree to which we are moved to ministry. If people aren't being moved to ministry, are we open enough to the Spirit? Are people intimidated by the weight of speaking ministry? So I've been concerned about how many very silent meetings we've had. Now, this has started to change recently, so I'm more reassured. But I think it's good for us to query ourselves once in a while. Are people feeling called to rise to ministry? Are people resisting the call, as sometimes we do? Or is it just a quiet time for us? Things happen like this, but I think it's worth some reflection.
I wonder, in response to Terry's comments, if silence over the past year or so is sort of a PTSD related to our COVID experience. People are grappling with the feelings that we may have had of isolation and fear, and maybe a little more reluctant than usual to hear the call of the Spirit. It might be a small portion of what we've experienced, but I too, like Terry, am happy that we've been having significant and meaningful ministry over the past month or two. Other comments or input on the first query about spirit and ministry? Go ahead, Liz.
It feels to me like we do a number of, my spirit is filled by some of the forums that we do. But they've been mostly social concerns based. And I felt like we really we don't have enough spiritual journeys told. We're not talking about our spiritual lives in our forums very often. And I think we could be doing more of that, and that would help to bring out some of the spirit. I mean, we really haven't, we're not doing a lot of study groups of any kind. And that's also probably because of COVID in the end. But we really need to get back to being together and talking about our experience, because that's the only way that we learn and grow as Quakers. We need to talk about our experiences of the Spirit more openly with everybody. And I think that's partially the responsibility of the Adult Religious Education Committee and partially the responsibility of worship and ministry. But I also think it's the responsibility of all of us to be offering things that address how we ourselves are experiencing the Spirit.
I'm going to move us along to the next query unless someone has further comments on worship and spirit. Meeting community. How does our meetings community reflect its corporate spiritual strivings? How do friends care for one another in time of spiritual or material need? What role do children play in the meeting community? That's a lot of questions. That's a lot of queries in one. I'll read it one more time. Meeting community. How does our meetings community reflect its corporate spiritual strivings? How do friends care for one another in time of spiritual or material need? What role do children play in the meeting community? I think we can all agree that with the reduction in COVID fear and restrictions, having children back and first day school resuming and several new children appearing has been a very welcome counterpoint to the couple years where we had almost total absence of children. So that's a blessing, and I hope it will continue and grow.
This is Sarah Swear. I have a comment about children. This is just an ongoing issue in the Quaker meeting, in any Quaker meeting. Because the meetings are intended to be full of silence, mostly, and worshipful meditation, it's difficult, or has been sort of difficult in the past, to actually have children in the meeting for any extended period of time. And in the meeting for worship, the first day school has always been really good about having children come in at the end and report on what they're up to in first day school. But another aspect of children in the meeting is the parents' role. And I think it's really wonderful in a way when a person who comes to meeting for worship has a child in their life, because I think it makes them go into a realm where they have to define for themselves what the meaning of being a friend or Quaker is to them. and what the meaning of meeting for worship is, because then they're trying to bring their child into that, their faith. And so it's probably, many cases a growth experience for the parent to try to introduce their child into the meeting, or at least their way of their faith level. I feel like I'm not using the very good words for this, but so I think it's a growth experience for the parent to come into Friends meeting. I'll leave it at that.
Well, in my role on First Day School Committee, I talk to parents a good deal. And one thing that is incredibly gratifying to me is when parents say that my child wakes me up on Sunday morning and says, "Are we going to the garden house today?" Yeah, there's a great deal of enthusiasm among our few children, to be involved here, and that's just terrific. It's felt like the growth of First Day School is, of course, connected with the ending of our COVID isolation and the growth of the meeting itself. There's lots of new people coming in. It's felt like a sudden springtime all at once. You can just feel the beating of the heart of the meeting now, and I hope it keeps up. The biggest challenge with First Day School is always getting enough of a critical mass of a number of kids, particularly if you can get enough kids in different age groups that we can have a Young Friends program, a high school age program, and a program with kids. We haven't quite got there yet, but we're headed that direction. But there's some critical moment, because if you don't get a Young Friends program going, the teenagers will not come to meeting. And if you don't get enough of a First Day School program going in general, parents will not come to meeting. So I feel very dedicated to doing whatever I can do to nurture the life of First Day School. And I hope all friends in the meeting can feel a part of that as well.
I think that we're doing a good job of taking care of each other, which is not easy. I don't think we do everything we could, but our care and counsel has been excellent at responding. And there have been lots of people in the meeting who've been diligent about taking care of each other in small groups. That makes me feel reassured that, the community it's been there for me when I've needed. So, and it makes me feel reassured it'll be there for me again, if I need it again.
Thoughts on how does our meetings community reflect its corporate spiritual strivings? That's one part of this query, and I haven't heard us this yet.
Whoops.
Going to have a hard time differentiating that from testimonies, which we get to a little later. Our corporate spiritual strivings. Mary?
Thinking about the heartfelt discussions we had regarding whether or not a hybrid meeting was appropriate, if it wasn't necessary. So I'm quite pleased with the outcome we came to, which is that, yes, it's another way of including people. But obviously, there was a great room for discord in terms of whether or not it was following tradition and things that have worked in the past and things that are tested and true. And I am very pleased that we decided to take a risk of, well, we're inventing something here.
I don't want to exactly be reacting to Mary, but for me, the important part of that threshing session and the other discussions we had about that is, I think we were addressing what I felt good about the fact that it was so clear in the end where the direction we should go in. I think we got to the spirit in a way that we sometimes, we do a good business meeting, but we're not always quite there in the spirit, in my mind. And I think there were individuals who really had some problems with the hybrid, and others who couldn't understand those problems until they actually listened. And I think we listened to each other and respected each other. And that was important, I think, and not something that's inconsequential. I'm glad we did it. I'm glad, even though I kind of knew also that it was going to come out. I'm glad with the way it came out. But I think we go forward with a lot more clarity because we went through that process. And that's what makes the difference to me. That's what being a friend is about, is being able to listen to each other, and not have somebody tell us what the best thing for us is and implement it and all of that sort of thing.
These two friends speak my mind too, and I think even beyond the threshing session on hybrid meetings, I remember the meeting. It was around the 13th of March when we met to discuss whether or not to close the meeting house because of COVID. And one of the things that to me was an expression of the community was, I don't want to use the word heated topic, but one of the items that got a lot of discussion among friends was the impact to the Islamic community that was worshiping here at the same time. And to me, that was a reflection of the care and love of the community at the time, especially.
I'm thinking also of the extended amount of deliberation it took to decide to invest significantly in the ability for people to hear each other during worship and in other settings, as well as contributing to the hybrid by installing the auditory system that we have. That was a major trend that had to be developed over some time, but it certainly increased the ability for people to share their ministry.
If we have no further comments on meeting community, let's talk about number 3, religious education. How has study deepened our faith and our understanding of what it means to be a Quaker? How have we explored issues of faith with newcomers, seasoned friends, excuse me, and children? The obvious, we have a wonderful Quakerism 101 program that's been running annually and is well attended and participated in. And we have adult religious education providing us with forums about 40 plus weeks a year, covering a broad range of topics, both social and spiritual. And despite the fact that they're down to only 1 or 2 members,
Actually, we may be at 4 now.
oh, wonderful. But that seems to be our primary vehicle for addressing that spiritual or education aspect of the community.
Propose a kind of query to presenters of educational events in the meeting. Forums, first day school classes, anything like that. And I'm not saying we haven't been doing this, but I think it's always good to keep before us the question of, is this educational activity merely interesting, or does it deepen our faith? Even, for example, is it merely interesting to discuss what's the theology of biblical passages? Or are we looking deeper and seeing how the Spirit may be opened by that activity? I've learned a lot about this from Latin American-based communities, that learning has to also be a spiritual activity. And not only opening your mind, but opening your connection with the spirit.
We're at 9 people here in the room and what? 3, 4 more online, 5 more online. This is a big forum. It's hard to educate people who aren't here. And I honestly, some topics bring more people. Some people just find 2 hours in the morning, especially if there's an afternoon activity, too much. I'm trying to think of what are the other ways we educate. Sometimes we have poster boards in the other room. We make announcements about great events in the community. But it seems to me that a great deal of our education is done in one-to-one conversation and in worship.
Okay.
Go ahead, Liz.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you stand. How have we explored issues of faith with newcomers, seasoned friends and children? I mean, that to me is kind of what stands out to me. And I know for me, one of the ways that's become pretty important is 8 hours of sitting with a seasoned friend driving to and from Livingston, Texas, has made a big difference to me. And being able to hear and just converse and talk and understand and connect, whether we talk about spiritual matters or not, is certainly helpful to me.
Life has really changed for me. I can only speak from my own experience in this with COVID, but also with the technology. Because I understand and I've become close to people who aren't in my own meeting community. And a lot of my Quaker growth is happening outside of this community. And I'm just reflecting on this because it's now available, but I wonder what is in the future, what it's going to do to meeting life. Because to me, a Quaker life is lived within a community. And in some ways, and I need to think about this some more, but in some ways, I really think it's more valuable for me to be doing some of that within this community rather than outside it. On the other hand, it's available outside. So just a reflection.
What is meant by community? And being in Austin, for example, what is meant by proximity? I'm just responding to the terminology that Liz is using and wondering what we all think. And what does that mean?
I think one of the other ways we learn from each other and develop as friends is in our committee work. That's one of the places where we build community and where we get to know each other beyond the hour or two we spend here. And depending upon, the scope or activities of the individual committee, there's multiple paths for learning and developing as a spiritual community. I think we have time for one more at least. Let's see what the next one is. Okay. Testimonies. Have we, as a meeting, witnessed to friends' testimonies? How has our meeting stood by faith against injustice and helped those in need?
Certainly, our activity in the death penalty, opposing the death penalty, is a witness, and we're a witness to each other, and in the outside world somewhat. Thank you.
The work that was done for a considerable period of time supporting the COVID, the effect of COVID, and providing funds for those in need who would not necessarily get much need was another major way of social justice. And our anti-racist group focuses on what we're doing with ourselves to lessen the impact of that issue, systemic racism, for those that are more subject to it.
I was trying to understand how have we as a meeting witnessed to friends' testimonies. And I think there's probably a number of ways that brings to my mind. For example, again, going back to the death penalty ministry, we maintain an awareness in the corner, and there's other things that we maintain an awareness that people are involved with. And it's important. It's important work. I think the generosity of friends, and this is into money, which is I guess one aspect, but the generosity of friends during things like the COVID fund, simple meals. Those are things that we as friends individually know of a need, and as a community, we're supporting that need. Those are just some thoughts on supporting as a community, as a meeting.
I would say that we are doing, in my experience, extremely well in this area, and that a lot of our social concerns have brought us into community, as people pointed out, in terms of the travels to to Livingston. And a lot of our work really is based on wanting to serve communities that are underserved, particularly communities of color. And so I think we're doing really well in this area. I think that does build spirit in our meeting. And it goes back to that. I think it's one of the largest ways in which we do build our sense of spirit and get closer. And also builds our sense of community. Those long drives, I have not done them, but I can feel the effect of them on the meeting. And I'm very glad for them. And I'm very glad we support that, plus a number of other things, including our friends in Colombia, and a number of things that we do without even, thinking about the fact that we're doing it. We also support each other in a somewhat hostile setting, not as hostile as some of the meetings in the South Central yearly meeting, but somewhat hostile political setting to bring our testimonies forward.
Any other comments about how we put our testimonies into action in the world? Let's squeak one more in here then. Decision making. How is the good order of friends used among us? How does the light illuminate our meetings for worship with attention to business? How does our meeting deal in love with the inevitable differences that arise from diverse leadings and points of view on issues of faith and practical matters? we've already touched on a couple of these things, but I think in general, Friends Meeting of Austin follows Quaker Good Order very well. Most things we deal with begin in committees and are brought forward to meeting for worship with attention to business. We use ad hoc committees and threshing sessions and those kinds of special functions outside of the normal committee order to deal with pressing new issues, including COVID-19 and technology and so on. And surprisingly, for a group that has way more than 10 people, we have very few conflicts that surface and prevent us from being led together in a community spirit. My observations.
During this past year, we also embarked on some restructuring of committees, and that could have been contentious, but it was done thoughtfully and carefully and gradually in a way that has lessened somewhat the burden on nominating to find more clerks. And I think that was an example of challenge that was met in an effective way.
Up to the time when we conclude this forum, focusing on our SCYM queries, and I think we've had effective and good participation. So thank you all who participated. And I guess at this point, let's close with some silence as we get ready to transition into meeting for worship.